You think you know Paul Heyman? You think you understand the master manipulator, the advocate, the genius behind some of WWE's most shocking betrayals? Well, prepare to have your mind absolutely blown, because what happened at WrestlePalooza wasn't just another swerve, it was the most calculated, cold-blooded backstabbing in recent WWE history, and I'm about to expose exactly why this betrayal runs deeper than anyone realizes. For months, we watched Seth Rollins trust Paul Heyman. We watched the visionary believe that lightning could strike twice, that maybe, just maybe, Paul Heyman had finally found someone worthy of his loyalty beyond Brock Lesnar. But here's what makes my blood boil: Heyman was playing the longest con in professional wrestling, and Seth Rollins was nothing more than a pawn in his twisted chess game. Think about it, when has Paul Heyman ever been genuinely loyal to anyone not named Brock Lesnar? CM Punk? Betrayed. ECW Originals? Abandoned. Roman Reigns? Used and discarded the moment it became convenient. Yet somehow, Seth Rollins thought he was different? The Monday Night Messiah thought he could tame the snake? That's not just naive, that's downright insulting to anyone who's followed this business for more than 5 minutes. But let me tell you what really happened at WrestlePalooza, because the dirt sheets got it wrong, the wrestling podcasters missed the mark, and even WWE's own commentary team couldn't piece together the full picture of this masterclass betrayal. The writing was on the wall from day one. When Paul Heyman first approached Seth Rollins after his brutal loss to Cody Rhodes, claiming he saw untapped potential and offering his services as an advocate, every single red flag should have been waving. This is Paul Heyman we're talking about, a man whose middle name might as well be betrayal. Yet Seth, blinded by his desperation to reclaim his spot at the top, welcomed the Viper into his inner circle with open arms. For 6 months, Heyman played his part to perfection. He was the devoted advisor, the strategic mastermind helping Seth navigate the treacherous waters of WWE's main event scene. He orchestrated victories over top-tier talent, helped Seth capture and defend championships, and most importantly, made Rollins believe that their partnership was built on mutual respect and shared ambition. But here's where it gets really twisted, and this is something nobody's talking about. Paul Heyman wasn't just using Seth Rollins, he was systematically destroying him from the inside. Every piece of advice Heyman gave, every strategy he suggested, every opponent he helped Seth defeat was carefully calculated to isolate Rollins from his allies and make him completely dependent on Heyman's guidance. Remember when Seth had that falling out with Kevin Owens? Heyman's suggestion. The tension with Sami Zayn? Heyman planted those seeds. Even Seth's increasingly arrogant attitude toward the WWE Universe, that was all part of Heyman's psychological manipulation. He was turning Seth Rollins into everything the fans would eventually turn against, setting up the perfect scenario for his ultimate betrayal. Did you notice Seth becoming more isolated from other superstars during his partnership with Heyman? Drop your thoughts below. And let's talk about the elephant in the room: Brock Lesnar's retirement. While everyone was focused on Brock's supposed farewell tour and his emotional goodbye speeches, Paul Heyman was orchestrating the most elaborate comeback in WWE history. This wasn't retirement, this was strategic absence. Heyman knew that for his ultimate plan to work, Brock needed to disappear long enough for people to forget just how dangerous their partnership could be. The genius of it all becomes crystal clear when you analyze the timeline. Brock Lesnar announces his retirement just weeks before Paul Heyman approaches Seth Rollins. Coincidence? Please. This was a coordinated effort from the very beginning. While Seth thought he was gaining the ultimate advocate, he was actually walking into a trap that had been months in the making. But what makes this betrayal so particularly vicious is how Heyman used Seth's own insecurities against him. Seth Rollins has always struggled with the perception that he's not quite on the same level as the true legends of WWE. Despite his multiple championship reigns, despite his incredible in-ring ability, despite being called the architect of the modern era, there's always been that nagging doubt about whether he truly belongs in the conversation with the all-time greats. Paul Heyman exploited that insecurity ruthlessly. He fed Seth's ego while simultaneously undermining his confidence. He praised Seth's abilities while subtly suggesting that without proper guidance, Seth would never reach his true potential. It was psychological warfare disguised as mentorship, and Seth fell for every single bit of it. The most infuriating part? The signs were everywhere if you knew where to look. Heyman's body language during Seth's biggest moments always seemed slightly off. He celebrated victories, but never with the genuine enthusiasm he showed for Brock's accomplishments. He strategized for Seth's matches, but his suggestions often put Seth in more danger than necessary. He protected Seth from certain attacks, but somehow Seth always ended up more battered and bruised than before Heyman's intervention. Looking back, what was the biggest red flag that Heyman was planning this betrayal? Let me know in the comments. And then came WrestlePalooza, the night everything came crashing down in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Seth Rollins was defending his championship against Drew McIntyre in what everyone expected to be a straightforward title defense. Paul Heyman was at ringside, playing his role as the concerned advocate, occasionally shouting instructions and looking genuinely invested in Seth's success. The match itself was a masterpiece of storytelling, with both competitors giving everything they had. Seth was showcasing why he's considered one of the best wrestlers in the world, while Drew was proving that his recent character development had elevated him to new heights. For 25 minutes, these two gladiators battled with intensity that had the crowd on their feet. But then, in the crucial moment when Seth had Drew set up for the stomp, his finishing move that has put away countless opponents, Paul Heyman made his move. As Seth bounced off the ropes, building momentum for what should have been the match-ending maneuver, Heyman grabbed Seth's ankle from the outside, causing him to stumble and fall face-first into the turnbuckle. The confusion on Seth's face was heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time. Here was a man who had trusted completely, only to have that trust shattered in the most public way possible. The crowd was in shock, the commentary team was scrambling to make sense of what they just witnessed, and Drew McIntyre capitalized on the opportunity to hit the Claymore kick for the victory. But that wasn't even the worst part. As Seth lay in the ring, dazed and defeated, Paul Heyman's music hit, and out walked the beast incarnate himself, Brock Lesnar. The man who was supposed to be retired, the man who had given his tearful goodbye to the WWE Universe, was back and aligned with his longtime advocate once again. The look of pure hatred and betrayal on Seth's face as Brock demolished him with 3 consecutive F5s will be burned into my memory forever. This wasn't just a wrestling angle, this felt personal. This felt like genuine emotional destruction, and that's what made it so effective and so absolutely enraging. Tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked were you by Brock's return at WrestlePalooza? But here's what makes me angrier than the betrayal itself, it's how perfectly it was executed. Paul Heyman didn't just betray Seth Rollins, he orchestrated a masterpiece of manipulation that exposed Seth's greatest weaknesses while simultaneously engineering Brock Lesnar's triumphant return. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, this was months of psychological warfare culminating in the perfect storm of betrayal. Think about the implications of what just happened. Seth Rollins isn't just back to square one, he's actually in a worse position than when he started. He's lost the championship, lost his advocate, lost the trust of potential allies who watched him burn bridges under Heyman's influence, and now has to deal with the reality that Brock Lesnar is back and more dangerous than ever. And Brock? He returns not as a retired legend making one last run, but as a destroyer with a renewed sense of purpose and the strategic mind of Paul Heyman guiding his every move. This partnership worked before, and now it's back with the added motivation of having successfully executed one of the most elaborate cons in WWE history. The psychological impact on Seth Rollins cannot be understated. This betrayal cuts deeper than any physical assault because it attacks Seth's ability to trust, his judgment, and his perception of himself as the visionary. How can you call yourself a visionary when you couldn't see the most obvious betrayal coming from a mile away? But perhaps the most brilliant aspect of this entire situation is how it positions everyone involved going forward. Seth Rollins now has the most compelling character motivation he's had in years, the burning desire for revenge against the man who manipulated him and the beast who destroyed him. Paul Heyman has proven once again why he's considered the greatest manager in professional wrestling history. And Brock Lesnar has an instant storyline that doesn't require months of build-up or explanation. Do you think Seth can ever trust another manager or ally again after this betrayal? The ramifications of this betrayal will be felt throughout the entire WWE landscape. Other superstars will think twice before accepting help from questionable allies. The WWE Universe will be more skeptical of seemingly beneficial partnerships. And most importantly, Seth Rollins will have to completely reinvent himself once again, this time with the knowledge that his greatest weakness is his willingness to trust those who claim to want to help him. What makes this situation even more complex is the moral ambiguity of it all. Paul Heyman never explicitly lied to Seth Rollins. He did help him win matches and championships. He did provide valuable strategic advice. He did elevate Seth's profile during their partnership. The betrayal wasn't in what Heyman did, but in what he was planning all along. This is the kind of long-term storytelling that separates great professional wrestling from mere entertainment. This betrayal wasn't just a shocking moment designed to generate social media buzz, it was the culmination of months of careful character development and psychological manipulation that reveals new layers every time you examine it. And let's be honest about something else, part of our anger comes from the fact that we should have seen this coming. We know Paul Heyman's history. We know his patterns. We know that his ultimate loyalty has always been to Brock Lesnar. Yet somehow, like Seth Rollins himself, we got caught up in the hope that maybe this time would be different. That's the mark of truly masterful storytelling, when the audience becomes emotionally invested enough to ignore obvious warning signs because they want to believe in the possibility of redemption and change. Paul Heyman played not just Seth Rollins, but all of us, and that's what makes this betrayal so effective and so absolutely infuriating. If you were Seth Rollins, what would be your first move after this betrayal? Strategy suggestions welcome. The WrestlePalooza betrayal will go down as one of the most perfectly executed long-term storylines in recent WWE history. It combines psychological manipulation, strategic planning, perfect timing, and emotional devastation into a single moment that changed the entire landscape of the company. Paul Heyman proved once again why he's called the Advocate, not because he advocates for his clients, but because he's an advocate for chaos, destruction, and his own twisted version of professional wrestling perfection. Seth Rollins may have lost everything at WrestlePalooza, but in that loss, he gained something potentially more valuable, a motivation so pure and so burning that it could fuel the most compelling redemption arc in WWE history. The question now isn't whether Seth will recover from this betrayal, it's whether the rest of WWE is prepared for what Seth Rollins becomes when he stops trusting others and starts trusting only himself. This betrayal wasn't just entertainment, it was a masterclass in long-term storytelling, character development, and psychological manipulation. And that's exactly why it makes us so angry, so invested, and so desperate to see what happens next.